Our talkback line is open on 1-800-316-316. You might have your own say, whether you're on the yes or the no side. Love to hear from you. 1-800-316-316. Gabriel, let's come to our Australian Constitution. I mentioned you are an expert in our Australian Constitution. You wrote the book. All right. So, I don't build you up too much here, but the sense of a constitution, and like most Aussies, probably my own understanding is not fabulous. Most Australians don't necessarily recognise what the Constitution does and what the intention is, what the Constitution builds in the unity of a nation. Give us your thoughts here around the Constitution and why it may be a dangerous thing tinkering with it.
Well, before I do that, I would like to say that an expert, because you have been describing me as an expert in constitutional law, an expert is a person who knows that he or she knows very little and still have a lot to learn. And that is definitely the case with regard to the Australian Constitution. Now, the Australian Constitution came into effect on the 1st of January 1901. And a milestone was the referendum, Aboriginal referendum of 1967. Of course, I was not in this country at that time, but it was definitely a milestone. Now, according to that change that occurred in 1967, it is possible for the Parliament to make laws with regard to members of any race. Now, prior to 1967, Aboriginal people were specifically and expressly excluded from that particular article of the Constitution. So the Australian Parliament is already entitled to make laws that improve the lives of Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people. And that's a good thing, because eventually that will remove any impediments to getting a job, to getting a decent life. It may be an opening for Australia to develop a colour-blind society, which is the ideal we should be thinking of as the future of Australia.
So, in your opinion here, our existing Australian Constitution sets us up to be a nation which is one people, a colour-blind society.
Yes, that is my argument.
So if there is change, that creates an opportunity for that to be dismembered.
Yes, I would say that is the case. Of course, the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, has argued that the proposal is only a very modest proposal. In fact, on the 26th of January, which is called by some people as Invasion Day, he said that it is a very modest proposal. To use his language, he said, "This is a modest and gracious request for reconciliation by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people." But, whenever people start to talk about modest changes, they often do not realize that modest changes can have tremendous consequences which are disadvantageous to the country in which we live. And in my view, there will be a major disadvantageous consequences in that it will lead to a divided society, a society of them and us. There will be people who simply have more rights than others. The principle of political equality will be completely dismantled, eroded, and done away with. So there are groups in society that will be preferred, will have more rights than others, and that can only lead to major conflict in the future.
Major conflict in the future, and yet what is promoted with the yes case, and I'll just reflect on some conversations I've had, where the thought is that if Australians do vote yes, they will be being a blessing to the Aboriginal people, because as I think about these things, and you might remember the movie The Castle.
Yes.
The vibe of it. There's your lawyer who's reflecting on the Constitution and says, "Your Honour, it's the vibe of it." And Aboriginal people want Australians to vote yes, to say, "We're with you."
Yes.
We are your friends. We are not your enemies. We want the best for you. And so there's something sentimental about that, talking about the vibe. But as you say, just reinforcing that just for one moment, what you intend to say, Gabriel, is that if you go down that path, you set yourself up for major conflict into the future.
Well, I do not intend to say that. I do say that, of course. And my argument is a very simple one. Do we want to create a society where burdens and benefits are distributed on the grounds of a person's race? My view is that we should not go down that path, because in doing so we are dividing society into different groups. There are some we will have more rights than others, and that can't be good for society at large. I kind of like your reference to the castle and the rather incompetent solicitor portrayed in that movie. He talks about Mabo, you know. Whenever a question is asked of him, he refers to the vibe Mabo and more Mabo, you know. That obviously is hilarious, but will ultimately not help us very much in solving the major problems that are confronting us in today's society.